Today, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of keeping both a personal and a business bullet journal. Hey y'all, welcome back to Dots and Beyond. If you're new here, my name is Beth and I am a 2-journal bullet journaler. It has been almost a year since I moved into this 2-journal system, so today we're going to talk about what's working for me, what's not working for me. This is not a migration video. That will be coming a little later next month as I prepare to move into new journals for the back half of 2021. But we are going to go ahead and set up a pro-con list here on my Archer and Olive Neapolitan Notepad. As you can tell, this is fairly well loved. I've used a lot of pages out of it, but I don't use the craft paper as much, so there's still plenty of that in here. And I thought we could go ahead and set up that list on this craft paper with the Neapolitan Notepad. Long before I started the Dots and Beyond brand, I did decide that I needed some definitive work-home separation in my planning life. And so the very first reason, and what is still a pro today, is that having those 2 journals definitely gives me that work-home separation. In my daily life, I am an event manager. It is a very demanding job, especially now that our events are starting to rebound from the pandemic. And so that is something that is still a pro. It's definitely a reason for me to keep 2 separate journals. The second pro on this list is confidentiality. When I decided to begin posting content on social media, I did have to become mindful of client confidentiality and how that was going to be portrayed in any of my content. I do keep client notes in my bullet journal, and I needed to have a way to be able to redact those for social media. And that brings me to my third point for the pro-con list. And that is journal usage and pacing. So what I began to find out in keeping a single bullet journal is that I was using way much more space for my work life than my personal life. And when I began to separate them and we were very busy in the event industry, I realized I was filling up a work journal in about 3 months and my personal journal was lasting me about 6. Now my current work journal is probably going to make it through the 5th month. I'll probably make it through May, which is a little bit of a surprise. But again, we have an uptick in work and I think it's going to very quickly switch back to where I am filling up a work journal in a matter of 3 months instead of 6. As an example, for the month of January, I did use more than 30 pages in my work journal, and that's when business is slow and events are slow. So you can imagine how many pages that would be if I have back-to-back events all year long. My second pro is content. Obviously, if I'm creating content for social media, having 2 journals gives me a lot more to play with in terms of creating content for both this channel and for photography on Instagram. And something that goes hand in hand with content is creative inspiration. Again, with keeping 2 different types of journals, I do dabble a little bit more in setups that are specific for work rather than personal, and it just gives me a lot more to think about and play with in terms of spreads and inspiration. Those are the pros for me in keeping 2 different journals, and they are strong enough that I will continue to keep 2 different journals, but I do need to tweak things a little. So we are going to also do a con list to see what we can fix in the 2 different journals to make them more effective for me. And this first con is creative effort. So while I do get more creative inspiration and content from the 2 journals, it definitely takes a lot more time to set up 2 journals with full art every month. And so I am rethinking how I want to do that. It definitely takes up a lot of time. The second reason on my list is personal journal neglect. So what I do find out is that I am using my work journal way more than I am using my personal journal. And I have several fixes to try and change that moving forward. The third con on this list applies to both bullet journals and will definitely come up in my migration video, and that is annual collection regret. So I have discovered that I am just not that great at keeping annual collections in either one of my journals, and I'll show you some samples here in a few minutes before we look at the fixes. if I'm not going back and filling in particular spreads in either my work or my personal journal, I definitely consider that a big red flag that needs to be addressed. For my fourth con, it is the establishment of a 12-month theme structure, specifically for my business journal. So if you have been watching my channel, you know that in my personal journal, I challenged myself to do a fierce fictional female a spread for each month of the year, and I am absolutely loving that collection and how it's coming together for the year. In my work journal, I have been branching off of favorite quotes from science fiction and fantasy books, TV shows, and movies, which is great fun. It is, but again, it is a lot of extra work. I have to put in a lot of extra thought process and coming up with what those 12 months are going to be, and I'm just not quite sure that that is working for me at this time. So here are my two current journals. They are both Archer and Olive journals. I went all in on Archer and Olive this year. The black one is my work journal, and then the one on the left is my personal journal. So let's go ahead and start with it and take a look on the inside. Here on the inside of my personal journal, I just wanted to highlight the annual collections and how I've not been going back and addressing those. This is my future log. Obviously, it is functional and an integral part of the bullet journal system, so that's definitely staying with me. But here are my social trackers for social media, my reading tracker, my watch and listen recommendations. I did do a reading journal, and so that's sort of why that reading tracker is not getting filled in. But it's just not something I'm going back and addressing on an annual level. But my themes, I absolutely adore. It is just one of my favorite things ever. It is what brings me back to my personal journal month after month, is deciding who my fierce fictional female for each month is going to be and trying to come up with the spreads for that particular theme. I will link my Instagram down below so you can see those photographs. But January was Okoye Black Panther. February was Elaine from Atomic Blonde. Daenerys from Game of Thrones was March, and then I did the Gilmore Girls for April. I was feeling less inspirational in April, and so I went the sticker route. Here is also one of my weekly spreads for my personal journal, and you can see how empty it is. It's just I use it, but I'm not using it to its fullest capacity, and that's something that I need to address moving forward. I love the spreads. I love how they're set up. I've just got to find the right balance between keeping two separate journals, and let me tell you, it is a struggle. So here on my two journals list, you can see where neglecting my personal journal is in that little spot. And now let's go ahead and look at my work journal, which not only did I not fill in the annual trackers, I never did put my name in it. So I guess I definitely need to fix that now too. But here we're flipping forward to what I put in as a shift tracker. Again, as an event manager, sometimes I'm on duty at an event, sometimes I'm in the office with COVID, sometimes now I'm working from home, and then of course I have off days. And I tracked through about mid-March, and now for about a month I've completely neglected it. I've just not gone back to it. Again, this is kind of a fun tracker to have in a work journal, but it's definitely not a necessity. And I'm thinking anything that I put in the beginning of my work journal would definitely have to be very specific to my work and getting things done. This is my Kanban board. We put a lot of projects on hold, so I haven't been using it either, simply because we're short-staffed. There's only a couple of us. And then, of course, this is my theme dilemma. So with my theme of doing quotes from favorite fantasy and science fiction movies, I started off with the movie Arrival. I absolutely loved coming up with this theme, as I did each one of my months. But again, it was much more labor intensive every month to do this. So the other thing that comes up, and I'm going to jot this down because I just thought of it, is explaining my work bullet journal to coworkers or clients. And it's not that I am in any way, shape, or form embarrassed by the artistic side of my journal, but there are a lot of questions about it during work hours that just kind of get in the way. I don't mind explaining the bullet journal method or pointing people to Ryder Carroll's initial video or book regarding the bullet journal method. But when they see artsy spreads, just a lot of questions come up, and I'm kind of tired of answering them. So it's one of those things that if I'm carrying this around with me, day to day, then I'm thinking these really in-depth sort of monthly themed spreads may go away. And then right here I'm flipping through, that is the month of January. That is how many pages I used in January for meeting notes, client notes, and then my weekly spreads. But again, my fun spreads, this was February. These are some other things on the inside that I'm definitely keeping, and I'll go over in my migration video. But then I did Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy for March, and then Battlestar Galactica for April. But this is one of those things that is kind of a con for me. I love doing them, but it just takes up so much time. So now that we have identified the pros and cons of keeping 2 different journals, specifically for me, your pro-con list may look very different from mine. Let's look at what I can do to fix these challenges. I never think of anything as a problem. I always think of it as a challenge to be overcome. And so I am going to create a little grid here so I can look at both personal fixes for keeping 2 journals and then business fixes for keeping 2 journals. If you are considering keeping 2 journals, I definitely recommend you going through this process, figuring out what would work best for you. For some people, I know it is leaving their personal journal always at home, leaving the work journal always at work. With COVID and me bouncing around between event facilities and my office and home, my work journal does travel with me, so it's a little bit different of a situation. But you just kind of have to look at it and figure out what works best for you, what doesn't work best for you. Looking back over my pro-con list, there are a couple of things on this pro list, specifically confidentiality and journal usage and pacing, that sort of outweigh anything that is on the con list. And so that is why, at least for the next half of 2021, I plan on continuing to keep 2 separate journals. If I was a full-time content creator or if I worked from home in some other capacity, I think I could keep everything in one and it would be perfectly fine. But for now, we're going to keep those 2 separate. So my first fix in my personal journal is to leave it out on my home desk. So I do have a creative space where I do my recording and I do all of my bullet journaling, and I also use this desk when I work from home. So if I leave my bullet journal out where it can be seen and it is accessible, I think that I will be more apt to use it on a regular basis. And then my second solution to this is to designate a specific time to sit down and update my journal every day. This is a little more challenging for me because my schedule with events can be rather erratic. So it's not like I can say, oh, I work 9 to 5 every day. I'm going to come home and at 5:30 I'm going to sit down and I'm going to put some time and effort into my personal bullet journal and get those thoughts down on the page or do some of those tasks that I need to do. So I do have to sometimes put that time in the evening. Sometimes I need to put that time at 9 in the morning because I'm working a night shift for a night wedding or a night gala, that sort of a thing. So it does take a little bit more effort than just I have the same shift every day and I can come home and update my bullet journal. I think those are definitely the 2 most obvious solutions for my personal journal. The third would be to how to address the annual collection situation and the fact that I never flip back to those pages. So I am pondering possibly starting a long-term collection journal. I know a lot of journalers who do this, and so it is something that is in my mind, in my thought process. I'm going to stick a big question mark out beside it because I'm not quite sure I'm ready to commit to that yet. Maybe it's something that I would do for 2022. I might possibly carry on how I set up my journal for the back half of 21, just like I did the front half of 21, see if I can get myself to use it. And if I don't, then maybe it's time for a long-term collection journal. I definitely have more thought processes on what I need to fix, how I'm using and setting up my business journal. And the first one is to simplify the setup. And there are several steps to that. One would be to make it more minimal. Another would be to make it more monochromatic, not to have a lot of color. Another is to not have an annual theme. So I'll probably be dropping the science fiction and fantasy movie themes moving forward in 21. And then another would be less artsy, but still appealing. So using a lot of black, white, silver, gold, geometric lines, that sort of thing to make it an appealing setup that I still want to use. More graphic and less artsy is probably the way that I am going to go in doing the business bullet journal setups. And then the last point I have for fixing what's not working in my business journal is to eliminate any of the quote unquote fun annual trackers, those things that are not necessarily geared directly towards productivity. So that year in pixels that I showed you for my shift tracker, I will not recreate in my back half 21 journal. And then I think I'm going to take those front pages of my bullet journal and specifically designate them towards tracking professional development. So I am about to embark on a course for work that my employer has decided they will pay for, which is something that I've always wanted to do, a certification I have always wanted to earn. I definitely have enough working hours for it, but I do need some professional development hours to get that. And so I'm going to set up my journal for the back half of 21 specifically designed around getting that certification and tracking that professional development. And yes, I will create some spreads specifically to do that and share them with you here on Dots and Beyond. So what's next? What's next for Dots and Beyond is that I will be sharing my setups for May in both my personal and my work journal. Within my May setups, I have set up migration pages because I do think my work journal is going to run out at the end of May and I'll need to migrate into a new one. And then my personal journal, I have it planned out where it is going to fit in with no extra pages by the time I get to the end of June. So I'll be doing a migration in my personal journal as well. So you can expect a migration video to also come soon where I will drill down into more detail on some of the spreads for both personal and work that are working for me or not working for me at all. If any of this has been helpful to you, make sure you subscribe down below so you don't miss those upcoming videos. If no one has told you today, please remember that you too are fierce. Bye-bye. Here are a couple more videos I think you might enjoy.